Ever feel like those "what's your learning style" quizzes kind of miss the mark?
Totally.
Like, yeah, I get it, I'm a visual learner,
Right.
but what does that even mean when we're swimming in tech and information all day long?
Yeah, good point.
So today we're ditching the labels and diving deep into how people actually learn from technical documentation.
Love it.
And we got a pro in our corner for this one, senior technical writer Curt Robbins.
And he's the real deal.
Oh, yeah.
This is someone who spent decades
Right.
making complex information make sense for
Yeah.
some seriously big names. FedEx, Microsoft, you name it.
Exactly. If you want to understand how people wrap their heads around tech info,
Yeah,
Robbins is the guy.
absolutely.
And in this article, he tackles a question that's always fascinated me, the whole text versus audio thing.
Get this, he goes way beyond that oversimplified, if you're an auditory learner, you just love podcasts idea.
I was just thinking that.
Robbins points out something that I think we all kind of know deep down. Even within visual learners, there's a whole spectrum of preferences, right?
Absolutely. Like some people need pages of detailed descriptions, and then others, like me, are all about those bullet points.
And here's where Robbins' perspective as a technical writer gets really interesting. He's saying these preferences aren't just random things we like.
Oh.
They're actually connected to how our brains function, our cultural backgrounds, even the environments we're in.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking about brain science now, not just how to read a user manual.
It is brain science, and that's what I appreciate about Robbins' approach. He's not afraid to connect those dots between, say, cognitive processing
Right.
and something like how we design a user interface.
So it's not just some people like pictures, some like words, case closed.
Right.
It's like this whole web of factors that influence how we learn best.
Exactly. And once you get that, you can start designing learning experiences that actually work for everyone.
I like that.
And that naturally takes us to his point about what he calls the rise of audio.
Which, let's be real, audio is kind of having a moment right now.
It is.
Big time.
And Robbins points out that while it's great for accessibility,
Yeah.
which is huge, especially for people with dyslexia, there's this other layer that often gets missed.
What do you mean?
Well, in our world, right, we're constantly on the go.
Always.
So being able to learn while you're commuting, while you're at the gym, even making dinner.
Multitasking.
Exactly. Robbins argues that's changing how we consume information.
Makes sense.
Playtime.
It's like audio is the cheat code for learning in this day and age.
It really is. But Robbins isn't ditching text altogether.
Oh, right. Because with text, you can always go back, reread, highlight, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's like having that anchor, that solid reference point. And Robbins talks about how important that is, that control you have with text.
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting. He's saying that with things like adjustable playback speeds and transcripts, audio's catching up.
Ooh, that's a good point. I've totally cranked up the speed on a podcast when I'm short on time.
Right. Exactly. And suddenly that old text is fixed, audio is fleeting idea, it's not so clear-cut anymore.
Interesting. So if our brains are all wired a little differently, our environments are changing, and the tech itself is evolving, I mean, where does that leave us? Is it just a free-for-all when it comes to learning?
Well, Robbins keeps coming back to this idea of multimodal content.
Okay, I've heard that term thrown around, but honestly, I'm not always sure I get what people mean by
I
it.
hear you. It's basically about creating an experience where someone can choose.
Okay.
Read, listen, or even watch, depending on what works for them in that moment. Flexibility and options, that's the key.
So instead of, here's a wall of text,
Right.
or here's a 3-hour lecture,
Sure.
it's more about different paths to the same information.
Exactly. Robbins even uses the example of a user manual.
Yeah.
Imagine having the regular text instruction, but also an audio walkthrough you can listen to while you're using the product.
Oh, that's cool, like hands-free learning while you're putting together furniture or something.
Exactly. And think about it. That could be anything. Textbooks with built-in audio summaries, online articles that you can listen to.
Right. It's like taking the best of both worlds.
Yeah. The depth of text, but with the immediacy of audio.
I like it. And that's where Robbins' background as a technical writer really comes through.
Totally. He actually gives some really concrete examples of how to make this work.
Like what? Give me the inside scoop.
Well, he talks a lot about how important clear, concise writing is, even for audio.
Because nobody wants to listen to a rambling podcast.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, he talks about using things like headings, bullet points, and visuals, even if the main way people are consuming the content is through audio.
So even if you're just listening, you still have those visual cues to help you follow along.
Exactly. He even suggests things like clickable timestamps that link back to a transcript.
Smart. So you can be listening and then jump back to a specific spot in the text if you need to double check something.
You got it. It's all about making it work for the user. And what I love is that Robbins actually walks the walk himself.
Didn't he say something about having a podcast about AI?
He did. It's called AI for the Masses. And honestly, if it's anything like his writing, it's got to be good.
Yeah, good point.
He's really got a knack for taking these big, complex ideas and making them clear and engaging and actually relevant, which I think is so important.
Absolutely. Speaking of relevant, though, it just occurred to me that this whole multimodal thing, it's not just for tech manuals or AI podcasts, right?
No, not at all.
It's like, this applies to how we learn everything.
100%.
Reading the news, following a recipe.
Having a conversation, even.
Yeah, it's like this hidden framework for communication.
Totally. And I think it's especially important these days, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They're just inundated with information.
From everywhere.
Yeah, all the time. So giving people different ways to process all of that, it's more important than ever.
It's not even just about making things easier to understand either. It's about making it engaging.
Yes.
I mean, think about it. Who hasn't completely zoned out during a lecture?
All the time.
Or just skimmed an article?
Yeah.
But when you find that sweet spot, that combo of text, audio, whatever works for you, learning just clicks.
It becomes enjoyable. And I think that's what's so exciting about this whole multimodal shift. It's not just about cramming information in there. It's about creating these richer experiences that actually stick with you.
So as we're wrapping up our deep dive here, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from all of this?
You know, for me, it really came down to recognizing that there's no right way to learn.
Yeah, I like that.
We all have our own styles, our preferences, our strengths, our weaknesses. Embracing that diversity, that's key.
It's like, just because you learn best by sitting down with a textbook doesn't mean that's the only way or even the best way.
Exactly. And for anyone out there who's felt frustrated, like they're just not getting it, remember, there are other ways. Don't be afraid to experiment. Find what works for you.
Find your own learning adventure, right?
Exactly.
Well said. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive, and I wanted to thank you for joining me on this.
It's been fun. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thanks for coming along for the ride. Until next time, stay curious out there.